Okay, I think we'll get started. It's 6:30, so we would like to be mindful of your time and our time. So I'd like to welcome you all to our Meet the College Representative Night. We are very excited to have everyone here. And one of the things that we love about this program is that we have a group of talented admissions people who can really tell you what it's really like in the world of admissions, and we're so thankful they're here. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Brenda Poznansky. I'm the Director of School Counseling and Admission at Bishop Girton. And tonight with us, besides the counselors, Mr. Noel, Mrs. Futrell, Mr. Mullen, are our esteemed panelists. First is Christine Bryan. Christine is the Assistant Dean of Enrollment, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at UMass Lowell. Also with us is Tim Kelly, Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission at Northeastern University. Amy Sembor, Senior Associate Dean of Admission at Providence College. Mario Silva Rosa, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Bentley University. And Julie Chapman, Director of Recruitment Partnerships at WPI. And apparently they are in another time zone because they're all sitting in the sunshine and it looks gorgeous in their background. So we'll have to figure that out. We'll have to get a better background. But anyway, thank you all for being here. We are thankful to everybody who sent in questions. That's really helpful so that we can make sure that we're touching base with things that you're really interested in and questioning. So let's get started. This year is clearly like any other year in so many ways. Students and admissions offices alike are wondering, how is this all going to turn out? What's going to happen? Here are some key concerns that students and parents have about the admissions process this year. And I'd like our panelists to just jump in. Whoever would like to talk, feel free to. We have a lot of questions, so we'll all get a chance. So obviously the biggest question on everybody's mind is test optional and test blind. How does this work? Can anyone share with our families, how does this all work, the test blind, test optional thing?
I can jump in. So WPI has been test optional since 2007. So we've been doing this for quite a long time. The reason why we decided to be test optional is we didn't feel like SATs or ACTs were really telling us anything about a student's ability to be a good WPI student. So having done that years ago, I'm very comfortable saying that we don't need those scores. So if anybody's struggling to take an exam or is worried about exam scores and is even asking the question about whether or not they can or should be sending the scores, don't send them, because we will spend our time looking at other aspects of the application that are far more important to us in the academic review. And that really is the high school transcript. That's a 4-year academic history of a student. I know all of us on this panel feel that that is really the case. That's where we're going to get the most information about a student's ability. And I will share that for WPI, we have also stopped using SATs and ACTs in scholarship and aid consideration many moons ago, probably about a decade ago or so as well. So hopefully that helps from our perspective.
I'm happy to just add maybe another perspective as a place that until this year did require testing. And I think I want to echo what Julie mentioned, because even for a place like Northeastern that has required standardized tests in the past, you know, the impetus for us making a change this year was, frankly, students' access to testing and your safety. And so I think testing is one of probably dozens of things in your life that have been interrupted over the last 7 months. And I think for all of us who have either made a change or continue to have this policy this year, we don't want that to be an additional stressor during the time of a pandemic. So, you know, even for a place like Northeastern, we are assuming actually that many people just even haven't had the chance to even take testing, and thus want to reassure you that students aren't at a disadvantage when they apply without a score. And similarly, you know, we're not using that for scholarship as well. So we want you to be safe and worry about other things in your life that you can control right now. And And so I think even for places that have not been test optional before, I want to reiterate and sort of echo Julie's message.
Great, thank you, Tim. Anyone else? Amy, Mario, Christine?
We'll probably add to Julie and Tim's comments the fact that we, just like Northeastern, we were an institution that required tests until this year. And but we felt that we were in a good place to comfortably shift gears to test optional environment. And in addition to that, I think that just like Tim mentioned, that we felt that a vast majority of the students will probably not have available results. So we worked extremely hard to try to shift our reading process to a place where we felt really comfortable making some decisions that held true to our needs as an institution, but at the same time, kept in mind the students' needs of being able to be flexible with the testing. And it's not going to hurt them not only on the file review process, but also on the merit scholarship side as well.
So Mario, well, that's a great segue into the next question, which is what will be different in the way you review files if the SAT is not part of it, or ACT?
Yeah, so basically, that was one of the components that we pay close attention to, and with that item off the table, we are shifting kind of like the weight that had been allocated to that piece of the pie, so to speak, to other areas. In particular, the curriculum. We need to get a stronger sense as to how the student has performed in the curriculum that they have taken at their respective school. We've always been able to measure the students' ability to achieve within the curriculum that it's available to them. So that's not going to be a disadvantage this go around. So the leveling of that, the consistency of the performance, it's also going to play a big factor and big role, in addition to other points of data that we like to look at. So that's how we are going to proceed in this cycle, and hope for the best.
For sure. Anyone else like to add to that?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, at Providence, as a school that has been test optional as well since, was it 2005, 2006, something like that. We've actually had some colleagues at some other places who've called and said, hey, we need to go test optional this year. It is not fair to the students to try to put this burden on them to put themselves in physical and mental stress in order to take this test. And just kind of, they were doing information gathering. This was back in May and in June to try to gather the information to see, how do we weigh things differently and whatnot. So I only share that, not that we're the experts on being test optional by any means, but that colleagues care, and that, places, like Tim and like Mario were just talking about, are really trying to recalibrate what they think, or how they've been taught to think, if you will, within the context of their review process, to put more weight on. So students in the audience, what that means is you need to be working hard and you need to be doing your best, even if it feels a little bit different this year for different reasons.
Actually, I wanted to add one thing, which is really interesting, and it's the fact that Amy and I had a great conversation last year about revamping or reimagining our process at Bentley, and we just picked up the phone and had a great conversation about how they did things at Providence. I also had conversations with, for example, WPI. I call Andrew, with Julie, it's Julie's colleague there, just to ask questions and get a better sense in other institutions. So we're not foreign to having conversations and collaborating across party lines. But certainly it was just great to see that.
So another question that's out there, and this would be, for all of you really, for certain programs in your school, things like engineering or physical therapy or business or nursing, are in the past, there have been some times when schools have been test optional that for those particular programs, students still had to submit test scores. What is happening now? What is the decision at your school?
We were the first public school in New England to go test optional about 5 years ago. And so we were always test optional across all of our majors. But I do know we've had some UMass events, and that some of them have more recently this year. Nursing's usually the big one within kind of the UMass system, are moving to test optional across all programs. So I think if you take nothing else away, test optional means test optional. And many of these offices that are pivoting from what I've seen, again, with our colleagues, is that just as all the high schools were working so hard over the summer to make sure you guys could come back to school, we were working all summer to say what needs to change about our admissions process. Let me touch base with people. Let me look at, maybe how this year performed or how are our students with no tests, and talking to people who have done this. So I think that this big pivot is never something you take lightly. And so that I think there's so much anxiety. We've heard of people, driving states away to take a test. And I think everyone here has basically said, don't do that. Like, do not put your health at risk for a test score, because there are so many schools out there where you do not need them this year. So please believe us. If you take nothing else away from that, I think really take that to heart, what we're saying.
Yes, and I think one of the confusions too is test blind versus test optional. Does anyone want to address that?
Sure, I can start. So, I think there are a lot of conversations about testing going on. There always are in our professional circles, at conferences, and even socially. That's how we have fun talking about stuff like testing. So, but I think that the truth is that there's both this, what are people doing in the immediate term for those who are making a change, and then some of these larger conversations about the implications of using testing in admissions. And, for some places that's been part of a holistic review process for a while, and some places it hasn't been. The reality is that for even test optional institutions, most of them will still consider testing if it's sent. And there's been this recent movement towards folks thinking about not considering testing, even if a student wants to send it. And I think, there's some really interesting conversation about that. I think that is frankly maybe the more emerging area within the field. Test optional is no longer a new thing. It's quite common. And I think as institutions, I think, one of the benefits of this year, if there's a silver lining to this, is that, Northeastern, as an example, has never had a full year where our entire applicant pool has been test optional. So for us to be able to do some analysis and data about that in a real context allows us to think about the way that we utilize testing in a way that we haven't had the ability to before. And I think lots of institutions are doing this. And so there are some, and I would say an increasing number, who have very publicly said, we're not even going to consider testing at all. And I think that'll be a continued conversation going forward. It was really only a couple of places that had been like that for a while, and now that I think that's continuing to grow.
So if a student sends their scores, do they have an advantage over somebody else?
Not at Bentley. We made a decision that we're not going to disadvantage students that are unable to send scores. So we are prepared to assess the student's profile with all the different areas that we pay attention to, including the test scores and without the test scores. And it will be across the board. And like I said at the beginning, it's going to affect not only the decision that we make in the admission side of the equation, and also on the merit scholarship side of the equation. the interesting thing is that some institutions, and we are right now, we are committed to 1 year, but some institutions are committed to exploring or doing a pilot program for 2, 3, 4 years. So that's really interesting to see the feedback that we will gain even within this year that is going to inform on how we are going to proceed moving forward. So it's interesting to be in this position.
Yeah, I would say too, I would agree with Mario. There is no advantage to a student who does submit test scores over one who doesn't. I think just to piggyback a little bit on what Tim said a minute ago too, as a school that's been test optional for a long time, when we had the conversation internally, I'll be blunt with you about going test blind, there were some people who said, well, what if somebody is a good tester and they've worked hard and they did have that opportunity to test and they want to submit that? We allow students who excel in certain areas to send in a portfolio or to send in a video of some sort. Why not allow that student to send those test scores? So that was one reason. But even more so, as some of you may know, depending where you work out there, parents, the decisions don't always land with those of us who are right here implementing the policy. That a lot of times something that is a wholesale change like that, like completely getting rid of test scores, or I'm sure for Bentley and Northeastern, you know, Mario and Tim weren't the ones just deciding on their own that this was going to happen to be test optional this year. They probably had 7 or 8 meetings with presidents and vice presidents and chancellors and you know, gosh, who knows who else, boards of trustees, to prove that we knew what we were talking about and that this was in the best interest of these future students. So I think sometimes the nuanced language or the difference in language there is not necessarily that we as admission officers feel one way or another about a particular thing. It's quite frankly what our institution sometimes has always done, which is my least favorite answer to any question ever. But sometimes it's just, you know, there are lots of hands in that pot to make that stew, and you need to be respectful of all the hands. Maybe that's too much bureaucracy for folks, but I think sometimes it's better to just explain why things are the way they are.
Well, we appreciate that honesty for sure. So Mario touched on this a little bit, saying that you're really going to look at the curriculum that the student is coming from. Is that true for most of you?
Usually what I say is we look at the transcript, and when I say transcript, it's the performance in the class as well as the rigor of the class. I think that also being said, we know sometimes this year we'll say everybody, I think every meeting I'm in, it's a year like no other. So we've been hearing from high schools who have had to cancel maybe advanced language courses because they couldn't offer them remote or just with the changes. So I think while looking at a transcript and looking at a student's performance, but also the rigor they've completed, also having some understanding that maybe this year doesn't quite look like the path the student was on because maybe they had to choose remote and remote offerings were only limited. So I think there's that piece. And then there's all the other pieces we ask you to submit, whether it's an essay, a letter of recommendation, maybe if you're applying to an art or music program, there's supplemental pieces. So it's all kind of part of to keep Amy's analogy, it's all kind of part of the stew going that we go forward with.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I will probably say that one of the reasons why we required test scores was because we are a technical institution, and that really provided us one more point of data that we could look at to see the potential of the students to do academic work. And that's only, I mean, test scores are, or testing as a whole only predicts or provides a guidance as to how the student will potentially perform freshman year in college. Beyond that, all bets are off. You could have the roommate from hell. You could have bad professors. You could have illness. I mean, there are a lot of circumstances that go into the whole process of retention. But it was important for us because we looked at the quantitative side of the equation heavily, and that helped us quite a bit. The reason why we are zeroing in on the curriculum is because we still want to have an incoming class that is going to be able to achieve within the curriculum that we have in place. So pre-calc, we've always told students pre-calc, bare minimum, but certainly calc or calc AB or BC can both very well within the process. So we are really going find with a tooth comb, go through that curriculum to get a sense as to the ability of a particular student. And then we couple that with everything else, but that will probably be important for us this coming year.
Great, thank you. I think that works in our students' favor because we have a pretty strong college prep curriculum. So that's nice to hear. So are there any spaces left? That's a big question. If everybody deferred, is there any seats left for me?
I think this has been asked at every parent panel we have done. I don't know if the Today Show covered it or whatever, but that it's almost like colleges are closing the door. And I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think that news story from our perspective has been dramatically overblown. Certainly we did see some students defer. It was not like it was 50% of our class. It was a handful. And so there's plenty of spots. Come on down to UMass Lowell. We got spots for you. But I understand if I heard that, I would be nervous too. It's already competitive enough. And now their seats are filled and that's certainly stressful. So I don't make light of this question because literally everything with parents, that has been the question over and over again. So I don't know. I'd like to thank the Today Show or MSNBC or whoever kind of put this out there as an issue. And I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues have to say if they're having that same experience, but certainly not the case for us at all.
You're absolutely right, Christine. I mean, I know at PC, we typically, if our freshman class is between about 1,000 to 1,050 students, maybe 1,075 on a big year, we typically have 8 to 10 students who ask to defer. We have a whopping 25 who asked us to hold their spot for next year. My goodness, I think what happened was that, all of these, when the pandemic hit, and all of these students had their admission offers in front of them, the families thought, oh gosh, what do we do? How do you start college in the middle of a pandemic? Well, why don't we wait a year and start next year? Then they started to think, well, what will I do if I stay home? What's going to happen? Because we had far more than 25 inquiries about deferring for a year. And we all had a meeting to say, what is our cap? What would be fair to the class of 2021? And it seems like no one wanted to pull that trigger and wait, because frankly, if you did stay home, there weren't a lot of those other options that people traditionally do on a gap year. And Julie, I don't know if something was different at WPI. I see you large on my screen, so I'm curious.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
No. We have about 30 students coming this January and maybe another 30 or so next fall. And no, same message is it's small numbers that we are confident we can manage. And I agree, there's been a lot of concern about this and I've had a lot of conversations, but it's an unusual year. I don't anticipate this having any impact whatsoever on whatever numbers are coming down the pike for fall 2021. We will be just fine. So, but I understand it could be a very different message at another school that's smaller or larger, has a larger number of defers. I don't know that I can speak to that.
Great, this is good news. Thank you. How will you determine the difference between applicants based on in-school or remote learning? At BG, students attended school every day in the spring, even though we were remote. They had homework, they were assessed, they were graded. How does this compare to someone who might have met their class only once a week and had maybe a pass-fail? Does that play out, or are we, thinking that we have to be pretty understanding of the circumstances? Certainly wasn't the student's fault. So I think our families are kind of anxious about that because our students put in a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. I think, at least at Northeastern, and I think at most of the places your students are probably considering, context is such an incredibly important part of our review in any year. Both the context of the students' individual lives, but especially the context of the high school and what courses are offered there, how grading is done there. And context, I think, is just going to be zeroed in a whole lot more this year. As somebody who is concluding in the next few days a bunch of virtual high school visits from around the country, I've seen basically a different story at every high school. And just like every individual has lived through this pandemic differently, every high school has managed it differently. And so we on the admissions team are just going to be probably zeroing in on more information in your counselor letter recommendations, in your school profiles, in your individual student essays as well, because we're certainly not going to hold anything against a student, given what's happened over the last few months. But the context that your school provides is incredibly important for us. And I'll just say, and I know all my colleagues agree with me, that you have some fantastic counselors here who are helping you through this process and know the types of information that we on the college side need to know in order to evaluate you fairly within context. So trust that we will be mindful of that, but also know that you have really good advocates on your side who are helping you, be set up for success as you're reviewed in admissions process.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else?
I'll just add that, as Tim said, I agree wholeheartedly. Context is key. Trying to make sure that a student is doing his or her best in the context of their curriculum themselves. You all should know too that your counselors here create this document that they send to us with your transcript, this school profile that lets us know about the rigor at your school, and that you have a limit of how many APs you can take, and that you can't just self-select to take 30 APs, that you must take honors before you take AP, and XYZ. So all of that context is there to then set you up for success, so that when we're looking at those grades and that transcript, I haven't seen it yet, but I am sure that your counselors are going to put a little note in there, so every single person reviewing your application will know you were full on remote, but full on every single day in front of that computer screen, and you were getting grades, so that we can put that context right around and know that those grades from the last term are real grades with real work and context behind it. We don't compare one school to the other, as Tim said. We really, really are paying attention to how you do within your context, because that wouldn't be fair to anyone, including you. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? This is great information. Thank you. So what are your colleges doing this semester academically? Do you have students on campus? Is it hybrid? Do you test students every day? I think a lot of students are a little concerned as to, what is their freshman year experience going to be like? So, and we don't know, obviously none of us know, but it would be helpful to hear how you managed yourselves opening school.
I can go first if you want. I don't know if you want every school to kind of say something. So up until the spring, I think we were optimistically hoping to be back mostly in person, and then in consultation with the state and just local officials, did a little bit of a scale back. So we have about 800 students in the residence halls. About 80% of our classes are virtual. We also have a big online program, but for us, the difference in a virtual versus online is virtual is you have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 and you log in, versus an online where it's kind of static and you kind of do X amount of work during the week. We do test students very regularly. I think we have had a very, very low positive case rate. I think only 2 since the whole semester began. So they are looking to try to increase students living on campus that expressed an interest in the fall and that we couldn't accommodate. And there are more committees than you can imagine looking at everything and trying to envision how do we keep people safe? How do we keep people healthy, including faculty, staff, students. Everyone's health and safety is of utmost importance to everyone. And I think too, especially at UMass Lowell, where we're in a big city talking to city officials and saying, you know, if you bring 15,000 students into a city, what does that do? And so how do we keep everyone safe and navigate it, but also connected to the university? Our Student Government Association said they had the biggest turnout for a vote than they'd had in school history with the students remote. So continuing to help people connect and interact and be part of a campus community while they may be sitting in a guest bedroom or sitting at home. So I think it's a balance that many of us are kind of figuring out as we go along.
Anyone else?
So about 74% of WPI undergraduate students are taking classes hybrid, living on campus or nearby. But I would say that the majority of courses, even if they are hybrid, means that they are spending a lot of their time remote as much as they can, and then in class or in person when it matters most. The labs, building a robot, those kinds of things at WPI are best done in person. We've been very successful. Our students are tested twice a week, as are faculty and staff that are on campus. I am not, even though it looks like I am, but I haven't been on campus for some time because we're trying to de-densify. And there have been the cases, I think since August, there's been about 20 positive cases, but all very manageable. And we're really proud of how things are going with having such a huge population on campus or very close to the campus community. So far, so good. Knock on wood. Hopefully it continues.
That's great. That's good to hear. Others?
So at Bentley, we made a decision last summer to go to a tri-semester. They call it trimester, but it was a tri-semester approach to give the families flexibility in the coming year. So students have the ability to go to Bentley in the fall, the spring, and there's a summer semester that will be available. So some families decided to defer to their start until the spring, about 25 students or so. We typically had about 17 students deferring every single year. Half of those, we have a large international population. Half of those were required to do military service in their countries, etc. The other half just wanted to do a variety of things, including kind of like a gap year experience. But we actually doubled that number, but we don't see that as affecting the incoming class next year. So we've been pretty good about making sure that the students understand that we have no issues on that. In terms of the classroom experience, we gave the flexibility to both camps, the students, on how they wanted to take the courses. So the modalities were really important for us, but also the faculty. The faculty has a lot of flexibility on how to deliver that content. So you could find yourself, and actually we were lucky to be able to do a survey, and we were trying to figure out how many students wanted to come on campus, because our limit, if we wanted to create some sort of quarantining section within the campus and whatnot, was about 70% of our population. And it came out around 68% of students wanting to be on campus. So some of the students were able to come in and take classes, some of their classes remotely, some of the classes in person, if they were in person. If they met twice a week, or they meet twice a week because it's still going on, they will split the class in half. Typically, our classrooms are about 22 students per class, so it's fairly easy to split the numbers and have an A and B group. And we also decided to end in-person semester just before the Thanksgiving break. So then right after that, students will be all remote and will take their finals as is. And then we are scheduled to be back on campus on January 19th. So, but things have gone pretty well. We do testing. There was a robust testing the first 2 weeks. Every 3 days, everyone was tested, students, faculty, and staff. And then after that, once a week. We had a minor spike recently, but nothing to be overly concerned about. And the tracing has been excellent, as you can imagine. As a self-contained campus, it's fairly easy to track things down. So,
Great, thank you. Anyone else? So a big question, obviously, and something we, since the start of college admissions, I think, was to get students on campus, prospective students on campus to visit, to see the school. We all have the analogy that we use, like buying a new car. You wouldn't buy, $40,000 car without sitting in it, the whole bit. So that's been off the table for quite some time. And so what should students do besides, we all know about the virtual tours, but is there anything other than that students should be doing, or is that the best way to really see the campus? What are your ideas on that?
I would say one thing not to do is just show up. I've heard horror stories of admissions offices that have only one person in the office a day and families just coming in, we're driving by and stop by. So please don't do that. I think every campus, we have plan A, B, and C to open up, and we've essentially had to reinvent our whole job. Our whole job is meeting people, shaking your hand, getting to know you, connecting in a high school visit. And so we all want you on our campus. I want to be back there. I don't mind, being home, and it's great to, at the end of the day, I'm home. I don't have a commute at all, but certainly we want to be back there. I think look for opportunities to connect with current students if schools offer those, because it may not be the facilities, but it certainly will give you a sense of this. I think everyone is offering so many different opportunities, and balancing that against the Zoom fatigue we know everyone's having if they're doing, virtual learning and things of that nature. So I think connecting with departments and connecting with the people, in addition to kind of what you can look at on virtual events.
Great.
Sorry, Brenda.
No, that's all right. Keep going.
I was going to say, I think one of the positive outcomes, maybe if there is a silver lining at all of this whole thing, is that a lot of us have, in addition, as Christine said, in addition to having to redefine our jobs, but we've become more tech savvy, and our admission web pages for those of us who are not technology schools have become more robust. We have more opportunities for chats with current students. We have a whole lot of tour guides and admission ambassadors who usually love to bring you to class with them or to smile at you and point you in the right direction to park at open houses. They want stuff to do. They want to talk to you. They want to share their experience and who their favorite professor was. So I echo that. Have a lot of us, if you click on our websites and you click on certain pages, these little bars will pop up that say, hey, chat with a student. And these are real people. They may not be sitting there live at that moment, but it will ping them and they will get back to you in a very short period of time. Maybe it's a chance for you all students to be a little bit, maybe think a little more deeply before you would have in the past visit a campus. What are you looking for? Why are you looking at the schools? Is it a certain major that's interesting? Is it, the intramural programs? Sure, feeling the campus. And I say the same thing, Brenda. It's like, for me, it's like some students will say, well, it's embarrassing to say that the campus is pretty. Well, no, because if you're going to be sitting on your front porch, if you will, of a new house, you want to make sure you enjoy the view. So yes, there is certainly that touch and feel aspect that we're missing, but I think we've all tried to up our game, if you will, electronically. And some of us do have visits, though slightly limited. And I can say that because New Hampshire is not on the do not enter list for Rhode Island, but you can come visit. Some of us have limited visit opportunities, small groups with a single tour guide or whatnot. If you're concerned about the campus itself, a lot of our websites have a COVID update bar that you can click on. I know ours shows our testing rate and positivity rate every single day because we did have a little spike as well. I heard it made national news. So we send kids to a hotel to hang out and wait. We didn't just send them, we also delivered goldfish and Dunkin' Donuts and all kinds of other things. But there are ways to engage for sure.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, much more than I typically do in previous years, I've spent a lot of my day on the phone with students too. So number one, you can maybe go for a walk and talk as opposed to be on camera. And also just, I think, actually connect with a real live person. One of the tough things about virtual programs is that, you've probably all been in a webinar where you ask a question and it doesn't get answered. And, you still have lingering questions after even a tremendous and really nice looking virtual session. And so I would say don't hesitate to reach out individually, especially for places that you're really seriously considering or have some really important or specific questions about. Most of us on our websites either have a way for you to get in touch with us or maybe have specific folks who cover your school or things like that. And, I think even though we're a large place with a very large applicant pool, that's something that we as a staff are prioritizing more than we have in the past. So don't be afraid to do that. We want to help you make the best informed decision and want to be here to, help you and answer your questions. So don't be hesitant to reach out to us.
And for those of you on the call today, you have to understand that admissions people are people to the nth degree. This must be very, very hard for you all to be home and not seeing colleagues and certainly not, having those usual kind of interpersonal connections and meeting with families and all of that. So, we have to feel a little bit sorry for the admissions folk as well. So, brave on, all of you. I know it's not easy. There's always a question that if too many students from one school apply to a particular college, that the college will not accept them all, even if they are all qualified. Is this true? It sort of doesn't make sense to if you really think it through, but for some reason, students and families are very nervous about that. And so if you do have a number of applicants from one school, how do you go about that?
I don't know I know there's 54 people here and I can see all the panelists at the top shaking their head no. So I don't know if all the parents can see all that. So I want to make sure you can to verbally say most of us are all of us were shaking our heads no. When we're doing admissions, it's not a cage match, it's not student against student and, they're battling it out for one single spot. We all want qualified students who are going to be successful and contributors to our campus community. And so I think that we work hard to evaluate those applications. And certainly there's some, programs at our institution. Nursing is always an example where the number of qualified applicants far exceeds the spots we can offer. And so those decisions are very difficult. I can't ever think of a time in my 18 years of admissions where it's come down to 2 students from the same school and there's only 1 spot ever. So I don't know if that helps alleviate any anxiety.
Sure. Anybody else?
I have to agree. I also thinking of the cycle of admissions for many of us, right? There are opportunities to apply in November for some of us, December, January, February. We don't know what's coming. So there's no way to say, all right, I'm just taking the first few out of the gate. Again, we're not comparing students against one another. We are really spending time, as Tim and Amy mentioned earlier, just in the context of that student and what they are providing for us. And trying to determine that fit just with that one individual, not in comparison to everybody else that may be coming from Bishop Guerin. And I think that's really important because students have different journeys and how they get there and how they may be a good match for our university might come through in different ways for each individual student. So I do think that's important to know that it is definitely not a cage match. And I'm going to use that from now on, Christine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there ever a time that a student, even though they have a good GPA, is not accepted to the college for a certain program because they're missing a certain course?
Yes. If we want to get particularly nuanced, sure. I want students to think long and hard about being a business major. If math is not your strong suit, that's one that comes to mind right away. If you don't have at least pre-calculus, if not calculus, to do business, believe it or not, even marketing, you need to do math. I'm just finishing the MBA program at PC, for example, and even having to go back and take prereqs with the undergrad students because I've been able to see that firsthand. Science, for example, thinking about nursing or medicine or being a chemistry major, you have to do math or you have to do science. Those are some things that some of us get to be sticklers about. It's not only the GPA, it's what makes up that GPA.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so EAED what are the advantages and the disadvantages? Do the odds go up if you apply early? For certain majors, is it recommended?
So I'm happy to start here. I think I talk to a lot of students who at all places in their college search process will tell me, well, I'm definitely going to apply early decision somewhere. I just don't know where yet. And I think I want to fight back against the notion that every student needs to apply early decision somewhere. There are so many students, the majority of students, who don't know their first choice college with enough certainty at the point of applying that they are ready to commit. That being said, there are a lot of schools, including Northeastern, that have outlets for students who are at that point. And so, we do look at early decision students differently because they're making a pretty serious commitment to us. Early action, which we also offer, is not a commitment students are making. So it's just really a benefit for you to receive your decision earlier. What I will say is that, especially in the light of what we're living through right now, knowing your first choice college with that much certainty can be pretty tough. And so we've tried to help, at least with students we're working with, to alleviate some of the sometimes sticky points around early decisions. So for instance, we introduced doing some early need-based financial aid reviews this year for students that are considering applying ED. We did some, more small scale programming with students considering applying ED. But the majority of students at most universities don't come in through a binding program. So don't feel that you need to be in that place. Vast majority of students in the country don't go through that process, even though our culture sometimes makes it seem like that's not the case. So don't be pressured into doing that. But if it does fit your scenario, talk to your counselor about it. Talk with us in admissions about it. And again, just we don't want the wrong person to apply early decision to Northeastern. So, again, we want you to make the best choice for yourself and, again, work with your counselor on your individual case.
Great. Thank you, Tim. I have two questions about grades and transcripts. So what if the first quarter senior grades are not available at the time of the deadline? And they come in after the deadline. Are they still considered? Do you wait for them? Do they even count? And the other is, does the freshman year count in your evaluation?
So freshman year does count. I think we get this question a lot of years because sometimes students come in, depending where they come from, 8th grade, sometimes at BG in particular, it's such a rigorous curriculum. They get their sea legs is what I like to call it, right? And so it certainly counts. I think all of us would rather see what we call an upward trend, which is your grades improve, than a downward trend. The downward trends are more concerning than that. I think in terms of grades, Brenda, when are your first, well, you guys are on more of a traditional schedule. So when do your grades come out? for seniors.
Our grades will be coming out the first week in November, which is a fairly
Okay.
traditional time. And so it's after November 1st. And so I think that's when students get a little nervous that, you know, they've worked really hard their first quarter and they want to make sure that that's included in the evaluation.
Yeah, I think we can make decisions with 9, 10, and 11. And so if we see a student that we think it can be admitted without those, but sometimes we will request them. If we see that student on the upward trend and we say, wow, they had an awesome junior year, they're taking such a solid year, we may hold a file to request grades. So again, I unfortunately, for UMass, I can't give a yes always. It's kind of a case by case basis, but in the same way, because we're rooting for you. So if we think senior grades are going to help, we want to give you every benefit of making sure those are part of your evaluation, I guess is what I would say.
I would add to that too, and yes, that freshman year counts. I've actually sat in committee where I've heard, this is back in the days of paper applications, somebody literally put their hand over freshman year and said, well, if you don't look at freshman year, ... So as Christine said, we're rooting for you. But the freshman grades do count. They are part of, you know, an entire 1/3 of those 9 through 11 grades. That said, we look for that upward trend. I agree completely. And, you know, same thing. You know, we can wait for the quarter grades. We don't always count them. Sometimes the quarter grades aren't what you think they're going to be. So sometimes you would have hoped that we made the decision without those grades. And, you know, there are a lot of times that students apply early action or early decision. And because we do need to see more, we may defer their admission. We may wait to see the whole first 2 quarter grades and ask you to hold on to your application and make our decision with the regular decision candidates in January or February, whenever that might be. So don't be surprised if we ask you to hold on to your application and you get a deferral letter in November. That's definitely something that is more common, I think, than families realize.
Anyone else about grades? All right. Do any of you refactor GPAs?
We do
I
at
see
Lowell,
some.
yeah.
I see some nodding.
Yeah, we do at PC as well. We take the weight out for your grades. I know the grades are weighted at BG. If you're in honors, you get, what is it, like 0.66 or something like that. And, you know, a 5,000 if you have an AP. I'm obviously exaggerating, but we go through and we take the individual A's, B's, and C's that you're getting in each of your classes for each of the 3 years or 3 1/4 years. And we come up with a flat 4.0. So you can never, ever have anything higher than a 4.0 in our admission process. In a different place, we give you weight back with what we call a strength of curriculum. So again, talking about that context that Tim mentioned so eloquently earlier, you know, how many honors and APs are available to you that you could reasonably take? Where did you meet the challenge? Where did you barely graduate? Those are the different measures there. So we'll give it back there. So that's something to be mindful of when you're talking to colleges, I think, is just that idea of if they say their accepted average is a 3.7 and you think you have a 4.5, recalibrating that, I think, is you know, important.
Great, thank you, Amy.
Same here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just mention, I think, and just to sort of piggyback of what Amy said, pretty much you'll hear that almost every place is going to look at both the performance in your courses and the rigor of your curriculum, but how they do that mechanically is all over the place. So we do recalculate GPAs into a weighted scale, and so if you look at our average, it's going to be a very different scale than at Providence. But we're doing the same thing in terms of looking at the entire picture of your transcript, the story it tells. And giving you credit for the effort that you've done. So there's just different mechanics of doing it. And I wouldn't favor or disfavor a school that either reweights or unweights or something else with your GPA. It's just different ways that we can, you know, manage our process differently. So
is the essay that important for your evaluation of a candidate?
I think for us it is. It's just an opportunity to dive into what the student is thinking in terms of perhaps future career, what they're looking at in terms of what they would like to accomplish in college. I think that it affords us some insight into what they potentially can do with education from our respective institution. Some students zero in on an essay to provide us also insight on the level of interest in our respective institutions. So certainly we want to hear your voice. We want to have a piece of work that it's going to resonate. As I tell students after I read my 100th essay, a lot of them start blending with each other. So certainly, how can you use that to separate yourself from other students when we read? And I like to read in the crazy morning hours of the day. That's like the best clarity that I have. So I want to be able to read some great essays at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. I mean, that's where I really get going on the process. So it's not unusual for me to really pay close attention to the grammar and the flow of the essay, the content of the essay, and what's that's truly saying and complementing everything else on the application. So yes, absolutely.
It's so good to know because the students really spend so much time on it and really work hard on them. So it's nice. And so do our English teachers. So it's nice to know.
And I could tell when the student just sat down the day before or the week before to write this masterpiece, and it's only a masterpiece for them.
Mario, we must be up way past your bedtime if you're waking up at 3 in the morning to start working, is all I can say. But I think too, we only know what students tell us. So sometimes essays can provide context that there aren't other opportunities for students to show in an application. And so I think what Mario said and what Brenda said, I also think too, authenticity. And so parents, it is your student's essay. And so, reading it over to make sure they don't have the wrong to or something like that, but really trying to let them speak and write for themselves. And something that you might think is cringy, we might think adds personality. That doesn't mean go over the top. I remember one time I had an essay filled with swears that were spelled wrong. So that's not what we're looking for. If you're funny, great. If you're not sure if you're funny, your college essay isn't the time to try out your jokes and humor. But I think having a really authentic essay can really lead to a lot of conversation in our committee reviews oftentimes.
So another piece of the application, the student activities, how do you consider those in admissions? Is there something you're looking for, like a strong commitment in an activity or leadership, or do you value some more than others? If a student has to work and they don't have a lot of activities, sort of like, how is that all evaluated in the admissions process?
I think we are all trying to get a sense of what the student is going to be like in our communities. And often we're going to get that from the information that a student provides through the activities section, on their common application, maybe through their essay, maybe through a supplemental materials that they are providing. We're not necessarily looking for a high number of activities, right? We all, I think, want to see that the student has 1 or 2 or 3 things that are really, really important to them. And maybe it's at the school, maybe it's in their community, maybe they have a job that's important to them, maybe they have responsibilities at home. All of this helps, though, as we're trying to understand the student and build a review from the foundation up about what they're about, who they're about, and how it's all going to come together as they become a college community member. And I think that's important to think of it. And also, I think it is an opportunity, and I hate this term, I'm going to say it, to humble brag a little bit. Don't leave us guessing about what it is that you're good at and you're proud of and that you've been involved in or that's meaningful to you. Let us know. I had a conversation with a mom in my hometown because I'm not on campus all that often. And she had asked if her son should include information about her Eagle Scout. And I thought my brain was going to fall out of my ear, because of course I want to hear that. That's wonderful. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge responsibility for that student. And I want all the details. Don't leave anything out. So I think that's an important thing to think about, is don't leave it to us to try and guess how important something is or what your role was in a particular team or activity or involvement that you have.
So what about volunteering? A lot of times students will tell us, oh, my parent told me I should volunteer. Do you have any ideas where I can volunteer because it will look good on my college application?
So, I mean, just one piece of advice for not just for college, but just for your life. I mean, do things that you want to do that are going to enrich, you know, and your interests and your passions and your skills. And I think part of that just begins with how you prioritize and talk about your engagement outside the classroom. Things that either sound quote unquote prestigious or that sound quote unquote impressive, if they have not been things that have been a meaningful thing for you, if you've spent so much more time doing something else and been engaged in something, maybe it's really unique, maybe it's outside of your school, maybe you need to explain it a little bit for us to be able to understand that. That's, I think, so much more valuable for us than to know that you might have done something once because you were sort of told to do it and you didn't take much away from it. You know, we have Division I athletes and really talented musicians and people involved in art and social justice and everything in between. And I don't think that they pretend to like doing the other things if that's not their real passion. So especially as you're thinking about reporting all of this on your application, really prioritize what's been a priority for you as opposed to what you think our priorities are, because we'd rather you be engaged in something you really like than to, you know, be engaged in something that's not enriching for you.
I will probably also add the fact that we are going to pay close attention to how the pandemic has affected the ability for students to engage and get involved, or perhaps how creative some students have gotten in terms of engaging virtually in new ventures. So it's really important for you to understand that we are all going through the same pains and challenges together. So we have that in the back of our mind as we are combing through involvement and extracurricular activities. I mean, we big on like what I call the propensity towards leadership roles. And those roles could be leadership roles within school clubs and organizations, but at the same time, that particular student that needs to be at home right on time to take care of siblings, that's leadership. And there are so many cases, so no one, it's disadvantaged when you are truly committed to certain activities that are going to bring the best out of you. And we can see that as we go through the evaluation process. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that, and I have interviewed many students this fall, and they're all concerned about how can I improve my chances and extracurricular activities, and I haven't been able to do this and that, or we were able to convert that club and organization on a virtual basis, and we're doing this and that and the other. So we admire that, and we are just going to pay attention to all those details.
Great, thank you. So obviously different schools do this differently, but pretty much the question is around different majors have potentially different criterion to be accepted into them. But if you don't get into that particular program, can you still go to the college or university? So people are kind of wondering, you know, if I don't get into the business program, would I still be accepted as a liberal arts major? If I don't get into the engineering program, is there another option? So if anybody could speak to that. I know it sort of depends on the school, and that "it depends" phrase is very common in this world that we work. So understandably, but if you could kind of generalize it for our families, that would be helpful.
I'm happy to kick this off. It's certainly something we do at UMass Lowell. We actually ask students for 2 choices of majors when they apply, and if they actually pick both of them in the STEM fields, we ask if there's a non-STEM interest, because sometimes we see students start off in another major and transfer to STEM. And I think, we processed this year, between us admitting to alternate majors and student requests, almost 1,200 major trains requests. So if you don't know what you want to study, that's okay. You're not alone. I think there's some huge statistic that most students change their major once. So when we would admit to an alternate major, sometimes it's maybe somebody who applied for engineering, but maybe only got through trigonometry. So we might be concerned about the math background, or nursing, which I mentioned is just very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at PC, we actually don't admit students to the college in general, and not their major, or to ask for an alternate choice or anything like that. So I think, to Mrs. Poznansky's point, it depends big time on the different institutions. If you're unsure, or if you were thinking about PC and I said you need pre-calc and you said, oh shoot, I don't have pre-calc, students apply undecided, and that's okay, because then you work with your advisor and you sort through the different options at the different colleges. But I would certainly ask that question of the colleges to which you're applying. Once you get that list called down to that handful of schools that you're applying to, as has been said several times, we're human beings on the other end of this. We're happy to answer that question. This is your first time going through the process. We don't expect you to know exactly how we do it at our school, or how any school does it. So to get it right for yourself, ask us. If you're applying to UMass Lowell and you're applying to Northeastern, you're applying to PC, shoot us a message, and just ask, hey, does it behoove me to apply undeclared, or do you admit me to the college if not my major? We're happy to answer.
We at Bentley, we just don't have that approach, because everyone that applies to Bentley, it's applying to the institution. We don't have separate schools or departments that you have to apply to, so we don't have that issue. And students just come in, and the vast majority of students are coming in undecided business. They have a variety of interests in different areas, and they just need to get through the first year or so, and then they'll discover their strengths and weaknesses and try to figure out exactly which area they would like to concentrate on. So.
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate, every school is different. We're probably more of a similar Bentley approach, in that when students apply to WPI, they're applying to the university, and they share with us their academic area of interest, which often changes over the summer before they even show up. When they enroll, students declare a major going into the second half of their freshman year, and it's as easy as a drop-down menu that they can select in their student account. And they also can select an advisor that they're already thinking is a good match. But again, it goes back to some of our requirements, which have been mentioned in other ways. But for WPI, you do have to have at least pre-calculus to be an applicant, 4 years of math, 4 years of English, 2 years of lab science, right? So all of that's going to translate great to almost all of the programs that we have. And that's an important piece. So definitely diving a little deeper to find out how this plays out at every institution is an important part of your college search.
Great, thank you. So there was a question asked about FAFSA and CSS profile, and in the admissions evaluation piece, is that ever taken into consideration, that information as far as admissibility to the college? And if there maybe was a mistake or something had to be adjusted, how does a family rectify that? Is there any way to talk with somebody about something that might be on a FAFSA or a CSS profile that really needs to be talked about. So the first question is it ever considered in the admissions process? And then the second is, how does one work it through if there are some concerns about what's on the forms?
Sure, I'm happy to start here. So Northeastern University meets full need for students who are admitted, but we are need aware in terms of our admission. So we don't have unlimited resources, unfortunately. There's probably about 30 colleges in the country that are both completely need blind in admissions and meet full need for every single student. You know, we offer a lot of financial aid each year, and frankly, you know, we're not hiding behind the fact that we are need aware. But it is, you know, not the first thing that we're looking at in our decision. It's mostly when we're, you know, trying to finalize our class and finalize our budget all at the same time. And then for the second part of the question, I think the other thing to know is that in addition to admissions folks being real people, financial aid or student financial services or whatever they're called at each individual school are also real people. And in most cases, or at least in my case, know a whole lot more about the financial aid forms than I do. And so sometimes it might be easier to start by asking an admissions person who you might have already been in touch with about a question. But in many cases, folks in financial aid work with prospective students in a similar way to continuing students, and errors happen, and you know, an extra zero here or something like that, or you forgot to put your social security number or whatever. There's lots of things with financial aid that can you know, can sometimes go awry, but again, there's real people behind this process to work with you through it. So I would say also don't hesitate to reach out if you're worried about that.
Yeah, I would agree with Tim on that piece there. Definitely call and rectify it. Sometimes mistakes are found late, and that's not helpful to anyone because it could mean the difference in like a $20,000 grant if you forgot that extra zero, which we quite literally had someone do a couple of years ago. And it was not a happy conversation on any end. I've worked at both need-aware institutions, as Tim mentioned, and I have PC, we happen to be need blind. However, we could admit you to the college, right? Need blind, no big deal. But then unfortunately, our budget won't allow for us to give you enough funding to attend. So there's sort of both pieces to that. Unfortunately, like families, colleges don't have unlimited resources. So I think the one piece of advice I would give, though, is don't apply to the college saying you don't need financial aid so that you get accepted because they're a need-aware institution, and then later apply for financial aid, thinking that now that you're in, you can get the financial aid. Because unfortunately, there are deadlines. Those deadlines are in place to try to allocate our budgets as best as possible. And if you wait to apply for financial aid until after you're admitted, you probably won't get any money or not as much as you would have received had you applied by the deadline. That's a critical piece. I've seen it happen when I worked at another institution where a family applies after the fact and there's no money left by that point. We've exhausted the budget. That's a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, that's great advice for sure. So what would your recommendation be for the class of 2022? Because we do have some juniors on the call and their parents, and wanting to know sort of when they should start this whole process. At BG, they just took their PSATs last week. We did host, all the juniors and sophomores did take their PSATs, and we actually hosted an SAT as well, and we never do that. And I'm hopeful we will never do that again, but that's just because I'm the test coordinator. But the idea is that, you know, for us, we consider that the kind of the launch for the juniors. We'll get those scores back, talk with our juniors about that and what does that mean, and then we start a full college program with the juniors and their parents in January, pretty early on. But is there anything juniors could be doing right now, or seniors should be doing right now, that besides applying, getting their applications out and in, is there anything they should be doing? Should they even do drive-bys of campus? You know, what's your families be doing?
I will just say one word, and that is breathe. And I think, frankly, there's so much going on in the world right now. Oh my gosh. And especially for juniors, number one, know that you are in really good hands with your counseling staff. Number two, you live in a part of the country where you can drive to so many places once it is safe to start visiting campuses, and that you are, students that have, don't have to rush into this process. And if you're curious and want to explore, it's easier than ever to explore from the virtual sense. But I think both for juniors and for seniors and for parents and for us, I think just taking a breath every once in a while is so important. And trying to think about what you can control in this process. Study and do the best that you can in your school, and try and have time for yourself and think about your mental health, and all of those important, like, foundational things that if you take care of that, set up for success the other aspects of this process. So we are going through this process in a similar sort of parallel way to you. We're trying to reinvent a lot of our professional and personal lives. And so give us, I would say, a little bit of grace as we continue to do that, and know that we appreciate that aspect of your lives too, and want you to take care of yourselves. So that's my advice, frankly, is just to take a breath every once in a while, and know that you're in good hands, and everything will turn out okay.
Great advice. Very much so. So how strongly do you all believe, and how important do you think it is that this is the student's process?
Is 1000% off the table? Because I think that's probably where I'm leaning. In all seriousness, though, I have good friends that have kids that are going through this process that are seniors right now. And I fully understand that, yeah, their mom and dad is sometimes their touchstone on a lot of things, and really helping them, guide them. It is still up to the student to really communicate with their parents on what they're interested in doing, and where they should be. But it is important for parents and guardians to kind of take a step back and let the student try out this process. It's a huge life experience, like so many things, and allowing them to kind of drive the bus and maybe sit in the back seat and enjoy the ride as much as you can is really an important part of this. But just be there to support and help keep things in line, keep those Excel spreadsheets together, whatever it is that you might be doing. Those are the ways that I think parents can really, really be helpful, is just helping to keep the process all in a nice bubble for the student, if that makes sense.
Anyone else? So I think we're coming pretty close to the end of our time. It's almost 8 o'clock. So we want to have maybe one last, I don't know, Tim kind of hit it out of the park there with the breathing. But is there one last piece of advice that you would like to share with our families as they embark on this process, but also right now, when they're, pretty much 10 days out to the first deadline that some of our students will be applying for? So any last sort of pieces of advice that you could share with our students and families?
I'll probably go here. I think that for seniors, I will probably say that it will be important for you as you go through this process to truly feel comfortable reaching out to the institutions. Certainly, like it was mentioned earlier, we are real people, and we are interested in addressing all the needs that you may have for you to be able to have all the tools necessary to make an informed decision in the very end. For juniors, I will probably say, and for seniors too, I guess, I will probably say that to put things into context, and I work at an institution that has a good number of students that are coming from international locales or faraway regions, even within our country. And year in, year out for the last, I guess, 20 years, students have researched institutions and made decisions to enroll at certain institutions without stepping foot on the campus. So what I'm trying to say is that this period, although it's troubling for everyone involved, has allowed us to think outside of the box a little bit more, and maybe for families to truly appreciate the opportunity to sit down and do some proper research online. And it was mentioned before, a lot of our, especially, I think it was Amy that was talking about our websites being robust with lots of options and lots of things. So moving forward, especially for juniors, but also seniors, I think that you can feel comfortable having a hybrid approach where you will allow yourself to be taken in virtually by an institution and can help you make that decision in a virtual way, I guess.
I'll add if I can. I absolutely, when Tim got on earlier and said, breathe, I was like, that's what I always say. But it's true. I think we have, all of us, have a propensity to let the hype swirl and build the stress. And this is a time with a lot of stressors kind of feeding in to us. Election, COVID, college process, mourning the loss of everything that we're missing, whether that's humans, that have, sadly passed because of this, or mourning opportunities that we don't have. Maybe it's that senior football season or whatever it might be. So I think putting it all in context, as Mario was saying too, and thinking we're all doing this, though there's varying pieces of it. I think seniors, be your best self. And by that, I mean, be kind, right? Try to give other people that little bit of grace too around you. Be smart in your actions and your words. I think more than ever, we are all aware, and we want to make sure that we are admitting good human beings to our campuses and to our communities, as well as smart ones. And we know that all of you are going to be prepared academically. But the application is your chance to show your best self, and to really take that time calmly to say, what is it that I've been involved with? Not mom made me do service, but yes, I went home and babysat, or yes, I'm a manager at Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm proud of it. So have that confidence that you're putting your best self on there, and that you're making those positive contributions. And I guess the last one is just maybe more for juniors too, or seniors once you get your acceptances, perhaps because you're a little further along in the process. But as a Dominican school, the priests on our campus, the friars, always talk about contemplation as well as communication. And we're all good communicators, texting and FaceTiming and chatting and TikToking and all those other things I don't know how to do. But contemplating, stopping and thinking about what you want and what you need to be happy and to be your best self. And I think that goes even in terms of the college search process. What kind of environment am I gonna be my best self in? So I'm sure that the priests on campus would be pleased that I threw them a mention tonight. If anyone runs into any friars, let them know. But I think contemplation is something that I know I'm trying to be better at as well.
Thank you.
I don't really, I was gonna say, I don't really know how to top all of this. I think my only advice would be like, maybe just keep track of those dates. Cause I think especially you guys are on a little more regular schedule, but I know in Massachusetts, a lot of us didn't even start school until, mid-September. So in my head, it still sometimes feels like March 13th when it was like, okay, we're moving home. And like, I can't believe it's almost November 1st. So maybe put some reminders in your phone. I also have found great benefit in just sweating it out. So get out there, go for a hike, ride your bike, get outside a little, watch out with the doom scrolling. I got tendonitis in my left arm from probably too much phone time. So I think take care of yourself. I think there are some small silver linings from all of this. I mentioned our major changes before, but in talking to some of those students, it was because with everything in the world, some of those students really contemplated a different path forward, whether that was moving into public health or moving into something in the political science sphere. So perhaps, you guys can be the good that changes the world. And so take advantage of the time you do have to kind of use it for good, I guess, and breathe and exercise and sweat and don't stay up too late and don't doom scroll. So I think that about covers it.
Thank you. Julie or Tim?
I'll just add, just thinking about everything that's going on in the world today, my very first day at WPI was September 11th, 2001. And I remember so many difficult conversations with students whose worlds were just rocked for a number of reasons. They suddenly had no interest in going from Chicago to New England, or they were so worried about their own families and their safety. And I just remember thinking then, and I feel that way now, everything's going to be okay. You're going to find a home, you're going to find a good place. There are so many wonderful institutions out there. And collectively on this screen right now, there's like over 100 years worth of college admissions experience and counseling. And please reach out to us. And if you have questions or concerns, let us know how we can help you get to a place where you're comfortable with whatever the next step is. We're happy to help there, but everything's going to be okay. I definitely want to share that message.
I'll just add that I think, remember that you're not alone going through this process either, that you have advocates for you and really knowledgeable professionals who work in your school, who are here to help you. And also, again, as we've said a million times, we here on the admissions side want to help you make the best informed decision as well. And so especially when you're seeing fewer people in person than normal, it can seem like sometimes you're going through this process by yourself, but just remember that there are folks here alongside you helping to cheer you on, number one, but also to make sure that you're making the best decisions. So don't forget that.
That's great. Thank you all so very much for your words of wisdom, for your honesty, and for you sharing your experience with our families. It's so important to hear it from you who are sitting on the other side of the desk, really sort of doing the work and evaluating our students and really giving them an opportunity. And really, it's so encouraging to hear that your approaches are so open and really thoughtful. And that's so helpful, I think, for everyone to hear, and we do appreciate it. And as Tim just said, this role as an admissions person, if you're on my side of the desk or their side of the desk, it's all about communication. And so do not ever hesitate to reach out to any one of our wonderful panelists, but also your counselor at BG, because we will, if we don't know the answer, we have great colleagues on the other side who are always so willing to help us out, as they even shared how they helped each other out. This is a friendly competition when it comes to different colleges, and you couldn't be in a better arena with these people who are just so amazing and so special. So thank you so much to all of you for taking the time tonight, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, and we hope that you all will be safe and healthy, and to all our families that are out there, thank you for joining us tonight. We know it's a busy time and a stressful time, so we do thank you. So good night, and we'll be in touch. So thank you.